Barbara Lamar was perhaps the ultimate Hollywood vamp. She cut a swath through Hollywood's glamorous nightlife, through the beds of powerful men, and, of course, across the silver screen. She was known for her dark, mysterious beauty. So beautiful, in fact, that, bizarrely, she was once arrested for being too beautiful. But no matter how brightly her image flickered on movie theater screens across the world, it seemed like darkness stalked Barbara throughout her life, and that darkness would finally consume her completely. "I cheat nature," she would say. "I never sleep more than 2 hours a day. I have better things to do." But as we will see, nature can't be cheated. Before we dive into the heartbreaking final act of this legend's life, shout out your city in the comments. Grab a drink, find a quiet spot, and stay with me as we peel back the layers of this old Hollywood mystery. Rhea Dale Watson entered the world on July 28th, 1896, in Yakima, Washington, a small frontier town still shaking off the dust of the Wild West. This was an America in transition, caught between the dying embers of the frontier era and the rising smoke of industrial ambition. The Pacific Northwest, where Barbara was born, was no longer truly wild. But it was far from tame. Towns like Yakima existed in that strange liminal space where wooden saloons stood next to the first electric streetlights, where cowboys and factory workers drank in the same bars. For families like the Watsons, this was not a land of opportunity. It was a land of survival. Barbara's father, William Wright, and her mother, Rose Watson, were working-class people who moved constantly, chasing whatever work they could find, from Washington to Fresno, California, and eventually to Burbank. The Watson family never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. This was not wanderlust. This was desperation. Rose had already been married once before William, bringing 2 children from that previous union, Henry and Violet. Into this patchwork family, Barbara and her biological brother, William Watson Jr., were the products of Rose's second attempt at stability. But stability, for the Watsons, was always just out of reach. The turn of the century was also the golden age of vaudeville and the birth of the motion picture industry for poor families with talented children. This represented a rare chance at upward mobility. If your child could sing, dance, or perform, you could rent them out to traveling shows or local theaters. Child labor laws were virtually non-existent. Children were commodities. And Barbara, even at 8 years old, was a commodity with rare value. In 1904, she made her professional debut in a stage production of Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was not there because she dreamed of being an actress. She was there because her family needed money. From the moment she stepped onto that stage, Barbara learned a fundamental lesson that would shape the rest of her life. Her worth was measured by how much people were willing to pay to look at her. But let us be clear about what Barbara's childhood really was. It was not a childhood at all. It was an apprenticeship in survival. Her mother, Rose, was a classic stage mother, the kind who saw her daughter not as a person, but as an investment. There is no record of Rose ever protecting Barbara from the vultures of show business. There is no record of her father, William, intervening when Barbara was thrust into adult situations far too early. In families like the Watsons, love was conditional. You were valuable if you were useful, and Barbara, with her striking looks and natural talent, was very useful indeed. The first major trauma came in 1913 when Barbara was 16 years old. Her half-sister, Violet, along with a friend named Cece Boxley, kidnapped her. The plan was to take Barbara from the San Fernando Valley all the way to San Francisco, and Barbara quickly realized they had no intention of letting her go voluntarily. She later explained to police that she feared for her safety and chose not to resist or attempt escape. Think about what this means. A 16-year-old girl sitting in a car with her own sister and a stranger, realizing she was being taken somewhere against her will, and making the calculated decision that compliance was safer than resistance. This was not the innocent fear of a sheltered child. This was the tactical thinking of someone who had already learned that the world was dangerous and that survival required strategy, not idealism. When her parents in Burbank learned of the kidnapping, they contacted the police. Warrants were issued. But before Violet and Boxley could be arrested, they gave Barbara money and coached her on what to tell authorities to avoid legal trouble for them. Then they simply continued their journey north, leaving Barbara to make her way back to Los Angeles alone. The charges were eventually dropped. The family moved on. But Barbara never forgot. She learned that even family could not be trusted. She learned that people saw her as something to possess, to control, to use. And she learned that if she wanted to survive, she had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone around her. After the kidnapping, Barbara's parents moved to El Centro, California, hoping to keep their daughter away from the corrupting influences of Los Angeles nightlife. But Barbara was not interested in being saved. She was interested in being free. And so she ran, back to Los Angeles, back to the dance halls and the nightlife, back to the only world where she had any power at all, the world where men paid to watch her move. She took bit parts in films. She danced professionally. She attracted admirers, many of them shady, many of them dangerous. And then, in a twist that would define her entire public image, she was arrested, not for a crime, not for breaking any law. She was arrested, according to the chief juvenile officer, because she was dangerously beautiful. Let that sink in. A 16-year-old girl was taken into custody because her appearance posed a threat to public order. The officer explained it with chilling paternalism. There is no charge against Miss Watson, unless it be that she is dangerously beautiful. She is such an attractive girl that men follow her about. We found her at the Rockwood Apartments. Everything was satisfactory. But there is a constant danger hanging over girls who are alone in a city. The authorities gave Barbara a choice: return to her parents in El Centro voluntarily, or become a ward of the juvenile court. Barbara chose to go back, but it did not last. It never lasted. Within months, she married a rancher named Jack Lyle in Yuma, Arizona. The marriage was brief. Barbara returned to Los Angeles alone, claiming to be a widow, saying Lyle had died of pneumonia. Whether this was true or whether Barbara simply invented a convenient tragedy to explain her sudden singleness, we will never know. What we do know is this: by the time Barbara was 17 years old, she had been kidnapped by her own sister, arrested for being too beautiful, married and widowed, and was living alone in Los Angeles, dancing in clubs and taking whatever film work she could find. She had learned that beauty was both a weapon and a curse. She had learned that love was transactional. She had learned that escape was not a destination. It was a way of life. And she would spend the rest of her short, violent life running from one man, one marriage, one scandal to the next, always searching for something she would never find: safety, love, peace. The things were stolen from her before she even knew they existed. The woman who would become Barbara Marr was born twice. The first time was in 1896 when Rhea Dale Watson came into the world. The second time was in 1915 on the set of a forgettable Western short film. when a stunt went wrong and an opportunity presented itself. The lead actress, a woman named Miss Marr, fell off a horse and was injured. Barbara happened to be nearby, watching the chaos unfold. Someone, desperate to keep the production moving, turned to her and asked if she could ride a horse. Barbara did not hesitate. "Oh, sure," she said. She climbed onto the horse, took Miss Marr's place, and in that moment, Rhea Dale Watson died. Barbara Lamar was born. She even took the name Lamar as a tribute to the woman whose role she had just stolen. It was fitting. Barbara's entire career would be built on taking what was not hers and making it look effortless. But this was not the moment that made her a star. This was simply the moment she became someone else. The real break came later. In 1920, when Metro Pictures took a chance on the scandal-ridden actress and offered her a contract. By this point, Barbara had already accumulated a resume that would have destroyed most careers before they began. She had been arrested for being too beautiful. She had married and buried a husband under suspicious circumstances. In 1914, she had married Lawrence Converse, only to discover that he was already married to another woman. Converse claimed drug and alcohol-induced amnesia. The scandal exploded across the newspapers. Then, conveniently, Converse died of a cerebral hemorrhage, and the problem resolved itself. Hollywood studios looked at Barbara and saw risk, but they also saw something more valuable. They saw a woman who could not be ignored. Her breakthrough came in 1922 with The Prisoner of Zenda, a lavish adventure romance where Barbara starred opposite Louis Stone and Alice Terry. This was the role that transformed her from a working actress into a symbol. She played the dark, mysterious woman, the one who tempted the hero away from the path of virtue, the one who promised danger and desire in equal measure. The audience loved her. Critics praised her magnetic screen presence, and the studio executives realized they had found something rare. They had found a woman whose real-life scandals made her fictional wickedness more believable. Barbara was not acting when she played the vamp. She was simply being herself. Or rather, she was being the version of herself that Hollywood wanted her to be. The studio system of the 1920s was a machine designed to manufacture stars. And Barbara was fed into that machine like raw material. Most actresses had their names changed, and their noses fixed, their hair dyed, their entire identities reconstructed to fit whatever image the studio thought would sell. But Barbara's transformation was different. She was already beautiful. She was already notorious. The studio did not need to change her appearance. They needed to weaponize her reputation, and so they did. Every scandal, every failed marriage, every tabloid headline became part of the marketing. Barbara Lamar was sold to the public as the woman no man could tame, the woman who lived by her own rules, the woman who danced all night, slept 2 hours, and did it all over again the next day. "I cheat nature," she told reporters. And people believed her. They wanted to believe that someone could live that intensely, that freely, without consequences. But behind the glamorous image, the mask was already cracking. Barbara's fame came with conditions. She was expected to maintain her figure, her energy, her mystique, no matter the cost. And the cost was steep. She began using cocaine to suppress her appetite and sustain the punishing schedule of film production. She barely ate. She barely slept. The studio did not care. As long as she looked good on camera, as long as the box office numbers stayed strong, her health was irrelevant. And Barbara, who had spent her entire life learning that her value depended on how she looked, did not know how to stop. She had built her entire identity on being the most beautiful, the most desired, the most dangerous woman in Hollywood. To lose that would be to lose everything. The difference between the woman on the poster and the woman in private began to widen. On screen, Barbara was powerful, untouchable, a dark goddess who consumed men and discarded them. In reality, she was exhausted, addicted, and profoundly alone. Her marriage to Jack Doherty in 1923 was supposed to be different. Doherty was an actor, someone who understood the demands of the industry. But the marriage was doomed from the start. Doherty later admitted that he could not handle being known as Mr. Barbara Marr. He watched as sycophants surrounded her, flattering her, shielding her from reality, and he felt powerless to intervene. I had to remind her of her failings, he said. And that isn't a happy situation for a man who loves a woman. He did not want to be a policeman, but someone needed to be. Someone needed to tell Barbara that she was destroying herself. And when he tried, she pushed him away. The work continued. Barbara made film after film. The Eternal City in 1923 was perhaps her finest performance. Playing Donna Roma opposite Lionel Barrymore, critics praised her emotional depth, her ability to convey both strength and vulnerability. But by the time she filmed Sandra in 1924, the camera was beginning to betray her. Close-ups revealed a woman who was too thin, too fragile. The studio used special lighting and heavy makeup to hide the damage. But it was becoming harder to maintain the illusion. Barbara was no longer playing a character. She was playing a version of herself that no longer existed. The mask had become a prison. She could not take it off. She could not stop performing. Because the moment she did, the moment she showed weakness, the machine would replace her. And in Hollywood, being replaced was the same as being erased behind the scenes. The stories about Barbara grew darker. On the set of The Heart of a Siren in 1924, she met actor Ben Lyon, and their professional relationship quickly became personal. Doherty, still technically her husband, accepted the affair with surprising grace. Perhaps he knew by then that Barbara was beyond saving. Perhaps he simply wanted her to find some measure of happiness, even if it was not with him. But happiness was never the point. Barbara did not know how to be happy. She only knew how to run from one man to the next, from one scandal to the next, from one role to the next. And all the while, the cocaine and the sleepless nights and the crushing pressure of maintaining an image that no human being could sustain were slowly, methodically, killing her. The studio did not care. The press did not care. And Barbara, trapped in the persona she had built, did not know how to ask for help. She had spent her entire life being told that her value came from her beauty and her ability to perform. And so she kept performing until she could not anymore. By 1924, Barbara Marr had become exactly what Hollywood wanted her to be. She was the vamp, the dangerous woman, the one whose beauty was so potent it could destroy men. But the machine that had built her was now turning against her. The enemies were everywhere. In the studio boardrooms, in the newspaper offices, in the living rooms of respectable women who saw Barbara as everything wrong with modern society, and Barbara, exhausted and addicted, was running out of places to hide. The studio system had always been a gilded cage. But for Barbara, it was particularly cruel. First National and Metro Pictures had initially banned her from their lots, declaring her too scandalous to employ, her multiple marriages, her arrest for being dangerously beautiful, the bigamy scandal with Lawrence Converse. All of it made her a liability. But then something shifted. The studios realized that the scandal sold tickets. Barbara's notoriety was not a problem to be managed. It was a product to be marketed, and so they brought her back, not to protect her, but to exploit her. They used her reputation to sell films, but they offered her no support, no protection from the press, no help with the demons consuming her from the inside. When she stumbled, when she collapsed, when her body began to fail, the studios did not send doctors. They sent replacement actresses. The press was even worse. In April 1924, Barbara was chosen as the face of a promotional campaign for Southern California tourism. It should have been an honor. Instead, it became a public crucifixion. Alma Whitaker of the Los Angeles Times led the attack with stunning viciousness. Whitaker wrote that Barbara was a peculiarly notorious little girl, questioned why someone with 5 marriages should represent respectable women, and concluded that choosing Barbara was a tactless affront to the women of Southern California. If the men want to be represented by Barbara Marr, Whitaker sneered. I am sure the women don't. The Women's Council in Sacramento joined the attack, recommending that local cinemas ban Barbara's films, citing her negative influence on young moviegoers. They dug up an old interview where Barbara had said that a woman must be immoral in order to be a movie vamp, and they used it as evidence that she was corrupting America's youth. The attack was deeply hypocritical. The same newspapers that condemned Barbara's morality made money selling stories about her scandals. The same men who publicly denounced her privately pursued her. The same society that arrested her for being too beautiful now punished her for embracing the only power that beauty gave her. Barbara was trapped in an impossible paradox. If she played the virtuous woman, she was boring. If she played the vamp, she was immoral. There was no version of Barbara Marr that society would accept. And so she stopped trying to be acceptable. She leaned into the scandal. She gave them exactly what they wanted, and it killed her. Behind the public attacks, Barbara's private life was disintegrating. Her marriage to Jack Dougherty, which had started with hope in 1923, was collapsing under the weight of her fame. Dougherty later gave an interview to Photoplay magazine explaining why their relationship failed. He said that Barbara's celebrity attracted a circle of yes-men who shielded her from reality. These people flattered her constantly, telling her she was perfect. And Dougherty, who genuinely loved her, felt obligated to counteract that. He had to remind her of her failings, to argue against the sycophants, to try to keep her grounded. But Barbara did not want to be grounded. She wanted to believe the lie, because the truth was too painful. The truth was that she was sick, addicted, and alone. The truth was that the cocaine she used to maintain her figure was destroying her body. The truth was that sleeping only 2 hours a night was not cheating nature. It was killing her. By late 1924, Dougherty was gone. Barbara had moved on to Ben Lyon, a co-star she met while filming The Heart of a Siren. Dougherty, to his credit, stepped aside gracefully, telling reporters he still cared for Barbara and wanted her to be happy, but happiness was a fantasy. Barbara had spent her entire life chasing it through men, through marriage, through fame, and it had never materialized. She did not know how to be happy. She only knew how to perform happiness. And the performance was becoming harder to maintain. The cocaine use, which had started as a tool to control her weight, had become a full-blown addiction. Barbara's body was cannibalizing itself. She weighed less than 100 pounds. Her voice was weakening. Her skin was growing sallow. The extreme dieting, the sleepless nights, the relentless pressure to look perfect on camera, all of it was taking a visible toll. During the filming of Sandra in 1924, the camera stopped being kind. Close-ups revealed a woman who looked ill. The studio tried to hide it with lighting tricks and heavy makeup, but the truth was seeping through. Barbara was dying, and everyone could see it. And then came another bizarre scandal. In 1924, Barbara became entangled with a man named Miguel Escoto. Escoto claimed to be a Spanish count and aspired to Hollywood fame under the name Mario Escobar. An inmate at the Los Angeles County Jail told police that he had witnessed Escoto killed in a violent dispute over Barbara, even providing details about where the body could be found. The authorities launched a search along the coastline near San Juan Capistrano. Barbara denied any connection to Escoto, but the damage was done when Escoto turned up alive. He told reporters about his romantic entanglements with Barbara and claimed that since meeting her, he had been the victim of 2 unexplained beatings. Whether this was true or fabricated did not matter. The narrative was set. Barbara Marr was dangerous. Men who got close to her ended up hurt. Then came the breaking point. In early 1925, First National Studios summoned Barbara back to Hollywood to film The Girl from Montmartre. She had just completed 2 films in New York, The Heart of a Siren and The White Monkey, both of which had been critical and commercial disappointments. Barbara knew this was her last chance. She told reporters, "If my next picture is no good, I will simply be kicked off the screen. It would be so much nicer to retire gracefully." But there would be no graceful retirement. There would only be collapse. Barbara arrived on set visibly ill. The studio claimed she had a throat infection and intestinal trouble, but the reality was far worse. She weighed less than 100 pounds. She could barely stand without assistance. She worked only a few hours each day, leaning on a cane accompanied by a nurse, and then, in October 1925, during filming, Barbara collapsed completely. She had to be carried away from the set. Doctors ordered an immediate hiatus. After some rest, Barbara attempted a comeback, shouting to reporters at the studio gates, "Tell everybody I'm getting along fine." But she was not fine. She could not complete the film. The studio brought in a look-alike actress, Lolita Lee, to finish Barbara's scenes. It was the ultimate humiliation. Barbara Marr, the woman whose face had sold millions of tickets, was replaced in her own film. Barbara retreated to her house in Altadena, away from the Hollywood lights, away from the cameras, away from everyone except her parents. Her son Marvin was cared for by her friend Zazu Pitts. The media buzzed with speculation. One writer prematurely mourned her. "Barbara is making a brave stand against the Reaper. Doctors say that the end is near. Her voice is gone. Her body wasted to 80 pounds. Miss Marr fights on, but a hopeless fight. And Barbara, alone in that dark house, knew it was true. She was not fighting anymore. She was simply waiting for the end." In late November 1925, Barbara Marr retreated into the shadows of her Altadena home, a place far removed from the glittering lights of Hollywood that had once worshipped her. The house was quiet, the curtains drawn, the rooms dim. Barbara lay in bed, her body a skeleton draped in skin, weighing barely 80 pounds. Her parents, William and Rose, kept vigil, but there was little they could do. The doctors had no answers. The studio had moved on. Hollywood, which had built her up and torn her down with equal enthusiasm, had already forgotten her. Barbara was 29 years old, and she was dying alone. There were brief moments of hope. In late November, Barbara gained a little weight and received visitors on good days. The Los Angeles Times published a photograph of her in bed, frail but smiling, even the performer. "Hello, everybody," she told them. "I'm getting better. I'll be all right pretty soon. It gets awfully tiresome sometimes." But I'll be all right. But these were the words of a woman who had spent her entire life lying to survive. Barbara knew she was not getting better. In a moment of clarity, she called her friend Zasu Pitts and asked her to take care of her son Marvin if she did not survive. She gave Zasu $100,000 for his upbringing. It was an acknowledgement of the inevitable. Barbara was saying goodbye. January 30th, 1926. The day arrived quietly, without drama, without the theatrics that had defined Barbara's life. She simply stopped breathing. Her body, exhausted from years of cocaine abuse, starvation, and sleepless nights, had nothing left to give. The official cause of death was listed as broken nerves and complications, a vague diagnosis that revealed nothing and protected everyone. The truth was that Barbara had been killing herself for years, and Hollywood had cheered her on every step of the way. She died in her parents' home. But she died alone in every way that mattered. No husband, no lover, no one who truly knew her. Look back at the beginning. Barbara Marr cut a swath through Hollywood's glamorous nightlife. Through the beds of powerful men, across the silver screen, she was arrested for being too beautiful. She claimed to cheat nature, sleeping only 2 hours a night. She was the ultimate vamp, the dangerous woman, the one no man could tame. And then she died at 29, weighing 80 pounds, alone in a dark room in Altadena. Her voice gone, her beauty consumed by the very system that had worshipped it. The contrast is not accidental. That is the entire point. Barbara Marr's life was a performance that ended in tragedy because the performance was never sustainable. She traded her childhood, her health, her happiness, and ultimately her life for fame, and we, the audience, have been obsessed with this story for a century because it confirms our darkest suspicions about beauty and success, that they are not enough, that they might even be curses. But whose fault was it Barbara made choices? Certainly. She married 5 times. She used cocaine. She refused help. But to blame Barbara for her own destruction is to ignore the machinery that ground her down. The studio system exploited her scandals for profit while offering no protection or support. When she collapsed, they replaced her with a look-alike actress and moved on. The tabloid press built her up as a symbol of female wickedness, then tore her apart for living the role they created for her. Alma Whitaker and the Women's Council condemned her immorality while selling newspapers off her scandals. Society arrested her for being too beautiful, then punished her for using that beauty to survive. This was not bad luck. This was a system designed to consume women like Barbara and discard them when they broke. And here is the uncomfortable truth. We are still doing it. The technology has changed, but the cruelty has not. Child stars are still exploited. Women are still judged by impossible standards. The media still profits from celebrity destruction. We have created new words for it: cyberbullying and cancel culture. But the mechanism is the same. Build them up, tear them down, watch them suffer. Barbara Marr died in 1926, but her story repeats itself every few years with a different name and a different face. So how should we remember Barbara? Not as a victim, though she was one, not as a cautionary tale. Though her life offers warnings, remember her for what she actually was: a talented actress who delivered powerful performances in films like The Prisoner of Zenda and The Eternal City. A gifted dancer who performed alongside legends like Rudolph Valentino. A woman who refused to be controlled by men, studios, or societal expectations. even when that defiance cost her everything. A person whose beauty was so extraordinary that it became both her greatest asset and her deadliest weapon.